And so joining us this week, we're going to get into something I'm really passionate about, something I love because I did spend, people that listen to the show, I spent many years working for a movie theater. And this person here is not only a theater manager, but is also a film projectionist. She's got, I've seen some of her old YouTube. She hasn't done YouTube in a while, but I've seen some of her videos. She's throwing film up on herself. She's wearing it as a necklace. She makes some funny videos. But with us today is Amelia Eichler, aka Mistress of the Real. How you doing?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Well, thank you. It's our pleasure, and yeah, as I said, the theater experience is something we always bring up in here. Is even though this is a physical media podcast where we love our Blu-rays and things like that, I still am very hard on people about, like, if you can go see it in the theater, that should be your first experience of a movie, because it really is like this different level of impactfulness, and like it really makes it important when you go see a movie at the theater. Is that something you believe in as well? I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think that physical film has always made me feel more connected
Yeah.
to the film itself and to the experience. It helps me pay attention. It makes me feel like I'm actually there for an event as
Mm.
opposed to just passively showing up to the theater. And don't get me wrong, digital's fine as well, but there's something very magnetic about physical film and seeing that in a theater and just even handling it.
Yeah, and we'll get more into. We got to get more into that tech stuff with handling film, because that's something that not everybody can understand how delicate that is. To do
Mm,
it right, especially with older films
very
that
much
you're
so.
re-showing. And but Andrew, talk
Yes.
to us. How you
Well,
doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. You transitioned into this so well. I didn't want to jump in
Nah,
all of a sudden, but I'm
please
doing
interrupt
okay.
me.
Yeah, we are very excited because we don't get to talk to people who directly handle film literally very often, and it's a unique experience, and it's also kind of a unique um, tech engineering process. A lot of movies are still shot on film, many shot digitally. I mean, the argument, debate, back and forth between making movies, whether it be shot on digital or shot on film, has been going back and forth for years, and we've seen the shift in the industry vastly over the last 20 years, I would say, with the introduction of digital filmmaking and digital projection. It's very difficult to find theaters nowadays that actually have film projectors, like actual film reel projectors. I mean, I think I've brought this up many times when um, Quentin Tarantino was trying to show, um, I think it was the Hateful Eight.
Hateful
Yeah, I
Eight.
think it was the Hateful Eight, and he wanted to show it in certain amount of theaters, and just some theaters didn't have the technology for it. They didn't have the people to bring in who knew the technology of it. And this was only what, 5 years ago, or no? When did the
Maybe a
Hateful Eight
little
come out,
longer than
Stephen?
that. Six,
2016,
six, something
15.
like that. Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway, within the last several years, and and also you have a lot of problems with equipment breaking down and not people not knowing how to handle that situation and whatnot. So there's a whole can of worms that go into this, and I'm fascinated by it, and fascinated by the history of film. We've talked many times in here about the history of film and its many different formats and stuff like that. I mean, every time we talk about aspect ratio, I feel like I have to preface it by saying yeah, aspect ratios have been a thing pretty much since the beginning, but they've also shifted over time, and that's also part of film. But before I digress, we do want to get into Amelia's background and where her love of film started and who she is as a person. That's you just tell us everything, really.
Tell us everything.
Oh
Hmm.
gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I feel like I'm pretty fortunate because I'm from Portland, Oregon, and I don't want to, I'm biased obviously, but it's probably in my mind the third best city in the country
Whoa,
for film.
third.
Yeah,
Okay, so
third.
now I got to know what second
Yeah,
and
who are the
one.
first two?
Well, I guess probably New York, I'd
Okay.
say, maybe second. Probably first is LA, but, maybe
Okay.
Austin's
All right.
also in there, and I mean, I haven't been all over the country, so I'm a little biased, but, I had people around me who were passionate about film from the get-go. I have to shout out my grandpa, who's still alive and kicking. My grandpa is a movie buff,
Yeah.
knows everything about anybody, knows the gaffer on a film, knows who the editor was, he just has he's an encyclopedia about film. So I grew up with him a lot I was around him all the time, and he collects lobby cards. So that's how I got into film. And that's why I'm here today. That's what I like to say, even though he doesn't like to admit that he contributed to that. But yeah, I just grew up loving movies. And then he has a friend who he met in the 90s at a video store. Movie Madness, shout out to them. They're still alive and kicking in Portland. You can still rent videos there.
Awesome.
And his friend Gary Locker, shout out to Gary, who's my mentor. He has been a projectionist for 50 years. So I just kind of met Gary over some tea at a bar in the morning that they go to every Friday. And I just kind of became fascinated with physical film because it wasn't something that was talked about a lot at school. I mean, especially in high school, there wasn't really any film classes where I was. I wanted to originally become an archivist. So that was kind of my route. And then when I met Gary and started talking to him about projection, I was like, you know what? They're handling physical film as well. At least the ones that Gary would talk about, or his personal experience was he was handling film. And I kind of just fell in that, oh, that's the maybe next best thing. If I don't become an archivist, I think this is a good path as well. And I think I just kind of was lucky in that I knew Gary and all these film people in Portland. And that kind of set me on a path towards being a projectionist. And I worked at Portland State University, where I graduated with a film degree, just a general film studies degree. I ran a theater with 4 other students. So Portland State University has one of the only student-run cinemas in the country. And we ran 35 millimeter. First, we started with Platter, and then we started doing only reel-to-reel. And then we did 16, and then we eventually got a DCP so that we could also run some titles that weren't available on film anymore. But that was the gateway. I only took it because I was like, oh, I'm going to touch physical film, and maybe this will help me as, kind of a resume builder for archiving. But then I just kind of got swept away into the world of projection and running a theater. And I think that was meeting Gary was one very big event in my life. And then 2 was working at Fifth Avenue Cinema for Portland State University.
That's great.
That's
Cool.
cool.
Yeah. I love hearing that, there's hope for, I have a daughter that's about to turn 1, and I think about, hopefully I can rub off on her. I'm hoping that film becomes important for her, and maybe she can do more than I could do. And whatever it is, a projectionist, whatever, making films. Well, I don't care what it is, just as long as she loves films, so I can share that with her. I just love hearing that. And, it's even cooler, it's a generation past your parents, your grandfather being the one that, influenced you is really cool to hear. And yeah, tell me about the, running a theater experience, because that's something I can relate with you definitely on. What were would you say some of the hardest things about running a theater? I mean, for me, I'm sure
gosh.
the booking is one of the tough things, especially with showing film.
Yeah, I mean, when we ran a theater, and it was supposed to be a student job that was part-time, but there's no way to run a theater part-time. I mean, it's just not possible. And we were somewhat unsupervised when we were supposed to be more supervised. So there was a lot of times I was working until midnight, 2 a.m., testing the film, running it through the projector, making sure it works. But I mean, the hardest thing, first of all, was I had walked in there without handling any film really before at all.
Wow.
So it's just kind of like a new door opening, and that could be kind of intimidating or scary. And you think that going to film school that you would be taught more about physical film or like interact with physical film more, but no, it was like one slide in a presentation, the first week of class. It's not really looked at or explained, or it's just kind of swept under the rug a little bit. So that was really intimidating. And also just getting used to hearing the sounds, knowing what's a good sound from a projector and film running through and what's a bad sound. Just being very hyper aware, because the booth is a place where you need to be like, have all your senses, like be very hyper aware, know if something smells wrong, sounds wrong, looks wrong, and just kind of be on your toes. And I think that if you're very passionate about film, I think anybody can project, I think. It is a skill, but if you have that passion and willingness to learn, I think that it's very achievable to become a projectionist. But yeah, the booking was hard too, because a lot of distributors have a lot of rules about booking, which makes sense, especially as film prints are more scarce. You don't want to just lend out your prints to anybody. But
especially if they knew that it was somebody that has just started. You said you just started handling films, so at the beginning,
even just
it
the
had to be
idea that it's
scary.
just the idea that it's like a student-run thing, and it's not, let's say,
These crazy kids.
It's not like
doing all this craziness.
It's not a film festival, or it's not something that's like maybe like an IFC center or something like that. They're just like, oh, it's a film, so maybe they are more hesitant to hand over their film canisters to young people, I guess.
Which
seems
is
a little snooty.
very fair. I mean, it's fair to some extent. The hard part about that is that in order to learn, I have to run film.
Exactly.
Right.
But because it's more scarce, it's a little bit harder to just get in front of a projector and say, okay, I'm going to learn how to be a projectionist now. And Portland State University, although it's an amazing film program and I loved going there, but it's not a prestigious film school. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of money. It's not like University of Southern California, where everyone's like, that's one of the top film schools. So there was some of that, and distributors want trust. They want to be able to trust you, and trust takes years to build up. And when you're working this job, you're only working until you graduate. So once you're graduating, the turnover is pretty high. So it was kind of a battle of trying to earn the trust and, be communicating with them, explaining what our processes were with running film and how we clean the projectors, how we inspect the film, and just kind of trying to improve the cinema in the 4 years that we're there. But it is sad to have to leave. Like, you built up this thing before I left, someone this is way before I started working there, but some projectionists who worked there ruined 2 prints from Universal back to back. He threaded a reel backwards. I don't even know how you do that, but I guess he did that. And Universal said, nope, you got to pay for this, for us to restrike the reel, and also you never get our prints again. And so right before I left, I had finally convinced Universal to get us prints again. And it's unfortunate that I didn't get to stick around, and I trained the people I trained when I left and was like, good luck. But it's hard. It's really hard to have that relationship.
Of course.
It sounds like a presidency. A president comes in and he gets a 4-year term. And it's like, well, they're either going to like me or I'm going to improve something or I'm not, You
don't get much time to work with. And for people who do go to college or universities or whatnot, the 4 years can go by very fast. It can go by very, very fast. And even looking back in hindsight, it can seem like it went by even faster. Maybe a bit of a blur for many people and whatnot. But I wanted to ask you, what type of films did you show while you were a projectionist there?
We also got to ask, what was the first one? Do you remember your first film you did on?
No, that's
Do you want to? Should it be like first film I inspected, or first film that I projected all by myself, or is there
both? Please.
Okay. Well, when I started shadowing, they had just ran Blue.
Okay.
And which is a funny film to kind of witness, because it's just a blue frame, like that's and voiceover. so it's a little hard to focus because
And for those
there's
listening,
nothing to go off of.
yeah, for those listening, that's Kieslowski's Blue, I assume. Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
yeah, and yeah, yeah. Wow, what an interesting movie to project, especially
The
with the lack of dialogue to kind of
the
learn from.
yeah, the first film I took an actual, like, picture of a frame of was, Big Trouble in Little China.
Cool.
That was super fun, but that was when we were plattering, and so I was inspecting a little less because obviously your main goal is for I'm sure we'll explain technically what platter is in a little bit, but, you're just trying to get the film on the platter. You're not really, like, feeling for splices, it's not as, thorough of an
Yeah, I think you'll
inspection.
have to explain what inspecting is as well. I'm just
Let's
for our audience,
backtrack.
of course.
That's
Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
our
Yeah,
audience, of
please,
course.
please break down your whole job, please.
Yeah, exactly. I'm assuming inspecting involves inspecting.
Yeah,
That's
so for like inspecting, it's making sure the film leader has the Academy countdown, so the numbers that help me frame and have the film ready to start the film. And then the cue marks, checking for cue marks, there should be 11 feet between two cues, which are usually those cigarette burns, those dots.
yeah.
And there are usually 4 frames of cues, and then the feet, and then another 4 frames. And then that usually will sync with the next reel. So you're basically switching back and forth, and you use the two cues as your visuals. And then just making sure the reels are taped down properly, they're labeled. It doesn't say tail, which is the end of a reel, the kind of protector leader of the actual film reel. That says tail 5 and it's actually reel 2, making sure everything is in order and making sure what the soundtrack is. Is it mono? Is it Dolby Digital, Dolby SR, A type? And then also what aspect ratio it is in, which is pretty easy to identify from like seeing the first frame. And it usually say on the reel if it's labeled correctly.
Yeah.
So, we would check for sound type and for aspect ratio because we needed to know that to project, but we weren't checking for splices, which is, the film. Uh, one, two ends of a film are not together and you need to splice it with tape using a splicer.
I actually have one of them devices in this room.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I took okay. So the theater I used to work at was closing down, and I snuck in there and took some stuff.
Yes.
So I can bring I could when I get a chance I'll go
Yeah.
and get it and I'll bring it on here and
Speaking
see
of,
if you
you
can.
mentioned, projecting wrong reels at the wrong time. Stephen, I don't know if you remember the story that you told me years ago. I think it was one of the Pirates of the Caribbean films where didn't you guys
Yeah.
project it the wrong way?
Well, I didn't do it.
Not you, but the people
Somebody
that
else
worked at the
built the
theater.
movie up, and they built the movie up in the wrong order. Like the
I've
reels
done
were,
that.
Mm.
yeah. It was like it was like the middle of the. It was like maybe like 45 minutes into the movie, and the movies are long. So 45 minutes in, suddenly we were in the last reel of the movie, and it was like the climax. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, where did this ship come from? And it's now got an octopus going through it. Like what? So that happened, and then we had to wait like at
Oh
least
my
an hour
gosh.
for them to break it down and build it back up again.
Yeah, I
So that we
remember
could finish
doing
it.
that with Precious.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
one minute she was, just having a dialogue scene in the next reel when I switched where it didn't really switch over, but it went to the next reel. She had a baby all of a sudden, and we're
You
like,
just ruined that whole movie for people.
where'd the baby come from? But it only thankfully it was only in front of the staff because we were testing the film.
Yeah.
But then it like took me 2 hours to take the film off the platter and put it back in the right order, and it was snowing outside, and it was, like, midnight, and it was awful.
oh, gee.
It's
So
rough. It's rough. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
there seems to be projecting film seems to be very involved, literally from the getting the element stage to having the elements in your hand, the film, and to putting it together or inspecting it literally. And then if there's something wrong, you have to fix it. So it seems like there's so much to do even before you get to the actual projecting of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, with platter, at least when I say building up, which Steven knows, but building up is basically like you're attaching each reel to the end
Yeah.
of the previous reel. Once that's done and you test it and run it through the platter, it's the idea is it's supposed to be, self-threaded. You don't really have to like stay. The idea is you don't have to stay there and watch it, although something could go wrong and then you have someone coming out of the theater and is like, "Hey, the film's not on the screen."
That's how most theaters would work. Like if suddenly the screen started turning into a burn mark and you're like, "Oh, yeah, well, I guess you need to run up there and stop the projector and fix it." And then
I mean,
you just splice, you would just cut off the bad parts and then put it back together.
yeah, I
And then
mean
keep
that
going
happens
again.
with digital projection as well. Like there's problems with those too. I remember.
I think with digital it tends to be more sound problems, I feel like.
Oh,
And
I've had sound sync
like
problems.
yeah.
Yeah.
That happened during Ford v Ferrari. When I saw that in the theater a couple of years ago. When I went to see Rogue One, um, the movie started like a couple of minutes into the movie already. Like it had skipped a whole part and then it had started already. I think
Somebody was already watching that movie and they just didn't
maybe
rewind
they
it
just
enough.
started at the wrong part.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like
Yeah.
after the introduction, um, but then like some people had to go out and tell them like, "Hey, this is not right," and
Well,
then they had to
to be
start
honest,
it again.
well, to be honest, nowadays, from what I understand, a lot of there is no person. It's like on
I
a
was actually gonna ask
automatic.
if it's on a timer or
It's
something.
on an automatic system. A lot of they don't even need to be people up there really that much. Like
Yeah, you can like loop playlists and just have the playlist continue.
yeah,
I mean, I guess that's also the idea is that it's so that someone can go start the playlist and then walk away and go do a million other tasks.
yeah,
But Platter is involved at the beginning and the end because then when you have to break down the film and put it back on the reels, it's like another 2 hours.
yeah,
As opposed to just doing changeover, it's nice. You just have to rewind the reel when it comes off the projector and then just put it in the canister. I mean, when I found that out, I was like, "Oh my god, it's so much nicer." I
It's
don't
so
have
much
to
easier.
stay on a Sunday, and after the movie's done, the matinee, I have to say, "Oh, I can leave. No, wait, I have to break down this print for another 2 to 3 hours.
hmm
Can't wait."
yeah. I have horror stories like when the theater I worked at was in its heyday, and it was like, and there was no like online ticket sales where there was literally still lines that would be waiting outside. There was only at the time when I was there was only one person that knew how to do it, and it was
Yeah,
our manager, and he was not a good manager. He was terrible. And there was one day where I think it was like, it might've been a Harry Potter movie. And so it was huge line outside, people coming in, and we were like, where's the movie? Oh, still in the canisters, not built up yet. And this movie was supposed to start like 30 minutes. And he like finally showed up, built up the movie. The movie was in an hour, like within an hour. Like we got it started like maybe 15, 20 minutes late. But God,
yeah,
like just it is involved. Even the platter system is supposed to be off hands, like you said
yeah,
during the showing. It's still a very involved thing, and I miss it, man. I miss that, like you say, that tangibility, that feeling, that understanding that there's something happening up there that's organic and not
yeah,
just like this, like, you know, digital thing that you can just do at home anyway. Like it's not making that different really,
yeah,
other than it's just on a bigger screen.
yeah.
So
It's like, high risk, high reward.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I understand. I think honestly, what people, of course, like a lot of things, we take things for granted. We don't. We lose that sight of why that's important as technology, changes things, and the generations, make it. They grow it with different things, and I just think that also, of course, the experience of just being in the theater has turned people off as well. Not turning off cell phones. That's also been an unfortunate side effect that's caused that theater experience to diminish a little bit. But I think where you're at, which I believe in Los Angeles, it's a pretty heavy, film going experience, especially on film, right?
Yeah, especially at the repertory theaters. You
Yeah.
know, I haven't gone to like a Regal or a Cinemark or a big chain theater, but it doesn't definitely those places don't really have that kind of showmanship or like we're going to an event. This is an event.
Yeah.
Um, this is an experience, and most people here are pretty good. I mean, sometimes people can be a little, and I think this has to do with some of the pandemic, not to bring the pandemic in here, but it is here. I think people have just come out a little different from the pandemic in terms of communal experiences, and like they kind of demand things to be more convenient and like quick.
Yeah.
And so I think they just have maybe more high expectations that things are easy now and more convenient because of digital, that like, why is this so difficult? Like, your job isn't that difficult. It's easy. Why isn't this just happen? Why isn't the film just on the screen? All you have to do is push a button.
Mm.
And so I think, you know, I haven't experienced it here as much, but I think some people are a little more demanding after the pandemic, in term which they have a right to be demanding for some extent, like out of their movie going experience. But it is difficult, especially when there's technical problems that arise digitally or, with film. I just kind of know how to problem solve film issues a little bit more than digital issues.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I mean, people are paying their hard-earned money to go see something, and they expect things to be seamless. But I think, honestly, I think we can all agree, as we get older, we got to understand that disappointment happens everywhere, and it's going to
Mm,
happen with our entertainment as well. So
very
people,
true.
I think people
Yeah.
need to have a little bit, maybe a little bit better emotional, stability when it comes to stuff like that. I think you got to
Yeah,
understand that it's something that's going to happen. Mistakes happen all the time in anything that we
right.
do, and people need to be a little bit more empathetic when it comes
Yeah,
to stuff like that.
especially in a public forum like that, there seems to be, even this was even before COVID times, before pandemic times. I think a lot of that was happening, obviously, but it feels like there's such a lack of social awareness, or just like movie theater going decorum, I think is a word that or a phrase that I tried to coin. It's just like people really didn't understand how to act in theaters. I remember this was when I went to see um Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. People almost got in fistfights before the movie even started, sitting in the theater, be, over just yelling at each other for things. Like someone was on their cell phone during the previews or something like that, or and people have been fighting over trying to save seats for people for years. Like that's still a thing.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's why they introduced um reserved seating and stuff like that now, just to kind of get rid of those things. Like I know they just kind of institute a lot of that here in most
Mhm.
theaters that just had the old style, like pick your seat when you get here, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That reserved seating has become more commonplace now, specifically because a lot of people buy their tickets online or on their phones, and they want to
Mhm.
do that. They just come in, go straight to the ticket person, and then go right in
Mhm.
or whatnot. So it's a lot more convenient, but it does also kind of connect with what Amelia was saying, or what Steven was saying. People want things to be faster, easier, more convenient, quicker, getting to point A to point B very, very fast,
I call
especially when it comes to everything in life,
I
really.
call that fast food. That means it's not going to be new. There ain't. I say that about streaming, is that it's like the fast food of movie going experience or TV experience. Like it's all about getting it in, but you're not getting what
Yeah,
you need from it. Like
yeah,
you're not
not
getting
only
the
that,
nutrients that you can
also,
get from something if you
yeah,
don't take the time.
we've talked about things on here a while about like quality and stuff like that. Where we talked about what's the quality you're like getting on streaming versus the quality you're getting in theater versus the quality you're getting on the physical media side with Blu-ray and 4K and all that stuff now. What's interesting is David Sandberg, who of course directed the two Shazam movies, but of course he started out in horror. He just did on his Instagram a like side by side comparison of the different formats on physical media or and digitally, where he would put up screenshots and zoomed in to check the pixels on the version of the new Shazam: Fury of the God that was available on iTunes, Vudu, Blu-ray, DVD, and 4K, and streaming on HBO Max, and he would bring them all up to compare which one has the quality, what the difference in quality is, and the difference in quality vary depending on the format in which you see it. Now, I know a lot of people don't care about that at all, but it's just something I find very interesting. How what Stephen is saying is the consumption of fast food, that idea is that it's quick, it's easy, it's consumable, and then you can just move on to something else. And that is really kind of what streaming has been selling itself on now for years. And
Mhm.
I know, Amelia, you did a whole thesis about streaming versus physical media. I
Yes.
noticed your pinned tweet. That's where I got that from. So don't think I did any deep diving whatsoever. But that is a fascinating idea that you brought up seemingly years ago, before this kind of explosion of streaming versus physical media was kind of even things people talked about regularly.
Yeah, and, I have to say I love convenience too, so don't get me
Of
wrong,
course. Yeah, of course.
but yeah, and when I wrote the thesis and I had to not necessarily, it wasn't defending the thesis, but I had to present it in front of all the honors people, part of the honors college at Portland State. They didn't, I mean, not everyone, but a few people just didn't really get it, To them, it was like more about, again, the convenience. They were saying, "Oh, but what you're saying doesn't make sense because what if I want to watch a movie on a plane?" And I'm like, I'm not talking about like watching movies in different places. I'm talking about how you're going to have access to this stuff in the future, which,
Yes.
as we've seen, and of course, my thesis is quote unquote dated now because I stopped working on it in
I would call it
2019. But,
I would call
you
it
know,
prophetic, really, because like you were just saying, 2019 is only 4 years ago, but it might as well be light years in terms of the way we consume entertainment now. Um, and I feel like it's prophetic in the sense that, you know, um, the pandemic, I think, escalated streaming to a point
oh, yeah,
that was going to be spread out over years, and it expanded it pushed it to the forefront right away. 4 years ago, I don't even think we had half of the streaming services that are available now. I mean, just
yeah,
within the last 3 years, between 2020 and now, you've got Paramount Plus, you have HBO Max, which is now Max, you've got Disney
Dis
Plus, you've
Disney, yeah.
got all kinds of other ones that I can't like pop off the top of my head, but there's so many now. And it really pushed that all the way to the forefront. And now I've said this so many times, and I'm glad we can bring this up one more time. That bubble that expanded so vastly is
mm,
shrinking now, and we're seeing the
yeah,
repercussions of it. Business wise, definitely, we're seeing the repercussions of it. We're seeing
yeah,
the studios having to make drastic cuts to
and
their
tax payoffs.
yeah, like that. They're not only that, but they're getting rid of content. They couldn't get enough of it before. They were
Yeah,
giving out content to everybody, just like, "Get you want a show? We'll give it to you. We're gonna turn this idea into a TV series or a movie that's gonna stream directly on here. Then we're gonna sell it to our consumers, and then that's how we're gonna sell the
mhm,
product." And then I guess the dust cleared, and we've got, wait a minute, we're
yeah,
billions of dollars in debt. What did we
yeah.
do? You know?
Everyone's scratching their head like, "What just happened?" Like,
Yeah.
and a lot of people who are making these shows and all of a sudden their shows are pulled and they're like, "Wait, I don't own a copy of my show." I mean, I understand you get swept up in this huge, like, storm of, "Okay, this is the biggest new thing." I mean, it's happened so many times throughout history. That's happened with sound, any new technological innovation, people just get swept away. And then once it clears, they're like, "Wait a minute. We didn't really have to actually get swept away. We could have just like put on a life vest and like doggy paddled for a while,
Yeah, yeah.
But
and it would
now
have
but
been okay."
yeah. But now it's, it was kind of increment over time. It's like we went from black and white to color, we went from silent to sound, we went from, Academy aspect ratio to now CinemaScope and VistaVision and all this kind of stuff. And then 3D, we'll kick in 3D.
Yeah,
And then
3D won't die. It keeps coming
yeah, I
back.
bring it up all the time just to piss off Steven because he
Yeah,
hates it so much. But 3D doesn't die. It just comes and goes every like couple of decades. That's my theory
yeah,
of the whole thing. But it was kind of gradual. But then now with the way in which our society, the way in which the industry is kind of structured, everything is accelerated so fast, and they pour in so much money all at once to boost these things and get them off the ground, that the repercussions are now so drastic. But it is kind of what Amelia was saying. These creators, these people who directors, writers, producers, actors, whatnot, they poured their time and energy and life into a lot of these works, and then now they're just gone. Yeah, you know what I mean? And
And now we have
because it's only available digitally, it
yeah.
is gone. Granted, there is
And now
piracy and
now
stuff
we
like
got all
that.
these strikes happening. So it's
Yeah.
it's where we're at now.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's and I didn't predict obviously because I'm not a writer, I'm not a showrunner or anybody involved. I'm not part. I don't ever want to be in production ever. Like, so not my wheelhouse. But I didn't even predict that that would happen either. I didn't even consider like I was mostly thinking of the consumer and the viewers as like my main concern of how are they going to access these films that they once had access to when we are so reliant on streaming. But yeah, it with all these strikes and all, people AI now, it's like so much.
It's
And I think
it's weird.
film is like a nice like physical film is a nice solace for me, you know?
Mm,
Um, it's patient,
right.
it's slow, it's not gonna happen quick. And sometimes it's a slow process and you can get frustrated, but there always is a huge reward for me at the end, and I feel like I've done something.
yeah.
Like with
Right.
DCP, I run DCP more often than film at my full-time job at USC, and I don't feel like I do anything. And I know that's not true. Like I am doing like technical things, but I really just feel like I am hitting play.
Yeah.
Right.
And I do problem solve, I do AV, but like it's rare that I walk away from a screening and I'm like, "Wow, look at me. I'm so proud of myself that I hit that server button and I ingested that DCP." But the more I've been projecting at my second side job with Secret Movie Club, I just feel like when I'm inspecting and when I'm projecting, I just feel like I walk away with more like pride and
Yeah.
feeling like I actually did something and actually like made people happy.
Yeah.
Um, and I felt like we were all rewarded in some way. Like
Yeah.
Well,
I was
you know,
rewarded by projecting it. They were rewarded
yeah.
by watching it.
I mean, and you know who probably loves to hear that? The filmmakers.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
like that you know, like that it's not just being thrown out there and forgotten, but that there's people that actually even if they don't even if they haven't even seen your movie, that they care enough to take the time, inspect it, do all them things. And then even if you don't love the film, you felt rewarded doing all that process to get it done. Because I
Yeah.
think that's what lost, as we've talked about a little bit as a theme here, is that this quick satisfaction thing, I think, takes away all the reward that you can really gain mentally from a lot of things in life, when you're
Yeah.
trying to
Right.
do it fast. And I mean, even though it's not the same, but like even with our Blu-rays and DVDs, instead of, saying, okay, I want to watch Billy Madison right now.
Mm.
Well, instead of just popping it on Netflix, I'm going to go downstairs, get my disc, find it somewhere, find it. I don't keep it. It's not organized. So I have to go look through my shelves and find Billy Madison. And finally, after about 15 minutes, I find it. It's a
Right.
thing, and then I find it, I take it. I'm like, man, I've had this for years. And I look at it and I'm
Yeah.
like, look at the back of the case.
Well,
Look,
there's usually, to be
it's a
honest,
process.
yeah, to be honest, there's also a kind of I mean, it really all depends on what type of collector you are, or what type of film fan you are, or whatever the case may be. But I just can speak from my own perspective. I think, most of what I have in my collection, there's kind of a story behind each one of them. A unique story unto myself, like how did I get it? Where did I get it? What were the circumstances behind it? Why is it in my collection? You know what I mean? Is it directed by someone I like? Is it starring someone I like? What's it do, why is this edition so good? You know what I mean? Why do I own it? I mean, and a lot of that goes into my thought process as how I curate my collection. But there's also that's kind of the extra additive to it all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The extra fun of it. It makes you feel part of
Engaged.
something bigger,
Yeah.
engaged.
Engaged.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes you do take a sense of pride, like Stephen was saying. And I know there's a lot of people who, I mean, you just take too much pride in certain things, but whatever the case may be, you need a little positivity in your life.
Definitely.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's
And we have to get into your collecting, because I see your collecting habits are behind you. And that's a little bit that's beyond me. I don't think I can collect physical reels of a film.
I
But
do want to know where you get them from.
yeah.
So please do tell.
So, okay. I one warning, I'm actually I'm at work.
Oh, okay. This isn't
This is
yours.
the inspection room at work. So that's
Oh, okay.
why I wish I had this rewind at my apartment. I could maybe fit it in my apartment. No, but I do have at least 3 60 millimeter projectors. I have maybe a handful of Super 8 and 8 millimeter projectors. You always got to have a backup in
Yeah.
case.
Of course.
But yeah, I have mostly 16 because that's the easiest to collect. I do have, I'd say at least, oh gosh, I do have more than 5 reels of 35. I have a copy of Pleasantville on 35. I have a
Nice.
copy of 2001. It's faded though, so it's not, I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
but it's there. I have a print.
nice.
It's pretty red and pink, but
You
maybe
can
Kubrick would have
still
wanted it that way. Who knows?
yeah, you can still gloat about it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Matilda, I have on 35, and I have a part of a Dean Martin film. Who's that lady? I don't know where the other 3 reels are. I couldn't find them in the hoarder house that I was taking these reels from.
Well,
Uh,
you gotta tell us about. I know you're a huge fan of Dean Martin, so please tell us about
oh gosh.
why. Please tell us why you love Dean Martin so much.
Okay, well, for everyone who doesn't know, I obviously have, his name tattooed on my arm.
All right.
Nice.
It was his birthday the other day, so shout out to him. I love you, Dean
So wait,
Martin.
how old are you? You didn't like date him at some
Oh,
point,
no, no.
and you
Dean
get your
Martin hasn't been
tattoo?
around
No,
for
I'm
a
just kidding.
while.
I wish. No, actually, probably wouldn't have been a good relationship. But I'm 26 for anyone who wants to know.
Oh, okay.
Um,
I thought we were going to be closer in age because of the movies you said you collected on physics. I was like, oh, she's probably like right around my age, in mid 30s. But no,
Well,
you're a little younger than us.
well,
See,
thing is that
this inspires me even more that you're younger than me and you're way more of a film nerd than I am. So yeah,
thing is, I've been saying this all the time. Movies, you can come to them at any age, really. That's
exactly.
the beauty.
mhm.
That's the beauty of movies. You can be 20 and watch a movie that came out 100 years ago. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's
Um,
great.
but yeah,
But yeah,
Yeah.
back to the
please
Dean Martin
go on.
story.
Please continue.
Well, it's kind of a little bit sad. So in high
Mhm.
in high school, I didn't have a lot of friends, which I now kind of realize and I'm not blaming it on this, but I have ADHD. I was undiagnosed, as most adult women find out that they were not diagnosed. And I had kind of a little issue with socializing my interests. I would hyper focus on them. So, a lot of other kids weren't really interested in Dean Martin in middle school with me. I couldn't really find it. So I kind of just saw his like music and television show and his movies as like kind of my security blanket. I don't know. They just made me really happy. Just like his personality, like how goofy he is made me really happy. And after like 5 years of debating a tattoo, I finally got a tattoo because I felt like 5 years is a good amount of time to think about getting some man's name tattooed on
Of
your body.
course. Yeah.
So, and that's how I got the tattoo, and he still like has a very important place in my heart. And people think that the tattoo is my name for some reason. Like they'll read it, they'll say Dream on, and I'm like, no, it's Dean Martin. It's not my name. It's not like it's not a phrase.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have like so many records of his. I have some of his movies. I have obviously those 3 reels from one of his movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love God. I used to have a cardboard cutout of him.
Nice.
I lost
It's a little.
that.
It's almost like my obsession with Nicolas Cage, except I don't have a
Almost.
I don't have a standee.
Not
Well,
yet.
I
Not
think
yet. Not
many
yet. Yeah.
I think many film fans, like diehard film fans, have their favorites that they're
Of course.
maybe not
Yeah.
obsessed with, but maybe they're just big fans of.
I haven't gotten a tattoo of Nicolas Cage yet, but
No, I
maybe I
feel like
will.
it's coming,
I
though.
might. I might. But
Feel like it's coming.
have you ever had a problem with like if you were in a relationship with somebody and they saw that you had a name tattooed on you that they were like, wait, is this like an X or like they didn't know who Dean
No,
Martin was?
but I've always like I don't know, I'm very like open, so I've always obviously they see it because if I'm wearing like not a long sleeve shirt, they'll see it. So I kind of just explain it outright, but I've had like other men go up to the men that I'm dating and saying, "Doesn't that bother you that there's like a dead Italian American's musician's name on girlfriend's arm, and they're like, no, that's like weird to like be upset about, but okay. It's
He's
usually
dead.
other men being insecure for them about like my tattoo.
I think
It's
it says more about their insecurities than
Yeah.
yeah.
yours or your partners or whomever.
The other more depressing thing that I've gotten from this is because of where it's tattooed, which is on my arm right here. People who are Jewish have been like, "Oh, that's where you have the Holocaust numbers. Like that's where people from the Holocaust had their numbers like put on their arm." And I'm like, "Well, I didn't really consider. I didn't
Mm.
I mean,
consider
I have a similar spot too, but I don't.
Yeah,
You know,
as long as it's not numbers, I can't speak obviously for the Jewish community, but I
Yeah,
know
I
they have a significant problem with numbers specifically in that area. I know a
yeah.
lot of people did that for um the character of 11
Oh,
on Stranger
yeah.
Things. A lot of people went and got that tattoo in the exact spot where you're not supposed to, or they were or was considered insensitive. I know that was an issue, and some people did that with Rocket Raccoon from the new Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, where they would get his name or his number name tattooed on them in that spot as well. And I'm like, it's an odd spot to do that. And
It's
just
funny. I don't
interesting.
know why I chose this spot. I really don't remember the
Well,
thought
because you can
process.
just, it's
I mean,
easy just to show off. It's
well,
like
I
a
mean,
sleeve, you
well,
know?
the thing, I think for a lot of people, I think they think about what is, I don't know, but it's not everybody, but they think about what is the least painful place they could get the tattoo for the first time. And honestly, that's usually a place where there's a little more muscle. There's a little,
Yeah.
it's
It
not so,
only
it's,
hurt when it got towards the
Yeah.
veins. That was a little
yeah.
bit of
Th-
but I
yeah,
just actually
that's where
got
it's
a
thin.
Gremlins tattoo recently.
Oh,
I got a
nice.
gizmo tattoo.
Nice.
I have a film reel right here on my arm, which you
Yeah.
can't see.
I have
Oh
one
my god,
here.
I love that.
Yeah. And it's got blood around it. And in the blood, it says, get busy living or get busy dying from Shawshank.
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah. And it hurts down here, like
Oh,
down
I'm
here,
sure.
closer
Well,
to get to
that
the
skin
under
is
the,
that
yeah.
skin is soft down there. Yeah,
Yeah.
that skin
But
is
it's,
Yeah.
soft down there.
I've wanted to add, I want to do a whole, sleeve of film stuff, but I'm just being so picky about what I want to
Gotta be
be.
Nicolas Cage.
Well, Nick Cage's got to be in there
It's gotta
somewhere,
be you
probably.
know what? Nicolas Cage as Superman. Why not?
Why would I do that?
I don't know.
Hell no. I'm not. That image isn't going to be on my body. But
I just watched Peggy Sue Got Married
Oh
recently,
goodness.
and I
Yeah.
cried a lot.
yeah,
That was like I was like, "Oh, this is so sad." Like alone in my apartment.
I was watching Renfield because it's on that convenient Peacock now, and he is just killing it in that movie. He's so
Nice.
awesome in that
As
movie.
Dracula.
Yeah,
I'm glad
he's
you finally got to see it.
yeah, he's soaking it up in that movie, and he's having so much fun. And I'm glad that he's getting more work.
Yeah, I know that
that
Blu-ray, the Blu-ray for that just came out, so it is
Yeah.
available now. We got to talk to the director actually back
Yeah,
when
we
the
talked
movie
to Chris
came out.
McKay. Yeah,
Back in Steven, was it
March or
March?
something.
Yeah, March
around
we
there.
talked to
Yeah.
him, and we were one of the first interviews that he did. Super nice guy, Chris McKay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really
He was
awesome.
here for a Q&A at work, and we had oh yeah, the studio brought vampire teeth to give out to people.
Nice.
So I have like a few on my desk because it's like I don't want to wear them because they hurt my gums.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah.
I really want to keep them and not throw them away, so they're kind of just sitting there as memories of our screening. One tattoo I do want to get, going back to projectors, is there's a projector that I really love called Simplex XL projector. That was my first projector I learned on, and probably my favorite projector. So I want to get the Simplex like logo that you see on like the projector or the trade magazines somewhere. I'm not sure where, but that's my next goal.
Awesome. Yeah, they're just so expensive. Yeah. I spend all my money on Blu-rays, so I don't have extra money.
That's fair.
Very true.
And I got a baby, so I just
you
don't
have
have no
you
money
have
for it.
adult responsibilities.
I got stuff to do, but it's
like a regular person.
As your tattoo says, you got to get busy.
Get busy.
I'm gonna die soon,
Yeah.
or I'm gonna die. But please, so we said you do obviously have some actually physical film in your collection, but do you have any Blu-rays? Do you do any of that
Oh
collecting?
yeah. So it's very funny you mentioned that because my boyfriend actually used to work for Warner Archive.
Oh, okay.
So we have hundreds of Blu-rays because
Wow. Yeah.
Jealous.
he took home so many Blu-rays when he left. And so we're buried in Blu-rays. If you ever need a Blu-ray, let me know.
Oh, okay. But yeah, it just if there's any Warner Archive we're missing, we
I
can
don't.
just reach out to her. And,
I coincidentally have Warner Archive stuff around me, so we're in the
Yeah.
right place.
We have. Oh, I have that. Yeah, I have
Rachel,
that Blu-ray.
yeah.
Yeah.
Ironically, I mean, we just mentioned all-time like favorites. Paul Newman's my favorite actor of all time, so I'm trying to get all of his work, including the work he
Nice.
directed. And this is one of the movies he directed. So I picked that up. I was actually looking at Warner Archive stuff over like recently, just because there's just such a catalog of it, and they come out with new ones every month, and I'm like, what have I missed? What have I missed? What are
well,
some
just
gems I
reach
need to
out to
get?
her, man. She's got the
Yeah.
she's got
She
the
got
whole
the
back
hookup
catalog.
apparently.
He did some of the menus. He did some of the social media for Warner Archive. So yeah, we have a lot of Blu-rays. I have a lot of DVDs. Now I have both the Blu-ray and DVD for some titles because it just happened that he had that, and I was like, oh cool, I got an upgrade for free. And my goal is to eventually, it's so dorky, but have a Laserdisc player because I have Laserdiscs, and get a CED player. Like I just want every format possible. Like I want Blu-ray, DVD, I mean, even audio, like 8-track. I want everything.
That's awesome. You're gonna need more space probably.
Yes,
but for all
space.
that,
Yeah.
Space and the technology to hook all that stuff up. I actually had that idea years ago. Did I say it on the podcast? Maybe I told Steven. I don't
Who
remember.
knows?
I think I said it on here before. So please. Well, I had the idea when I was making upgrades to my home entertainment center that I kind of wanted that same idea. Like I wanted a laser disc player. I still have my VCR. I want to have that out as well. And then I kind of abandoned all that when the research of it kind of was overwhelming a bit, especially with laser discs and things like that. The thing is, laser discs they're not expensive really. You can find them pretty cheap online. I know I found a bunch, like I think I have like Jurassic Park on Laserdisc, Ghostbusters, maybe 2001, a bunch of ones that I picked up off of eBay with the idea that I was going to use them. But now they're just kind of collector's item collecting dust. But a lot of people have that setup, like you were saying, where they've got every single format from forever. It's overwhelming.
I've seen that more in video games. Like I've seen guys that I know that have every video game system going back just to have them all, like so they could play Frogger on like 5 different
I still have my
formats.
original NES. I tried to get it running about maybe 10 years ago, and I couldn't get it running. I even bought like replacement parts for it and tried to hook that up, and that was part of the same time where I was trying to kind of get all that set up. But then I kind of just shifted.
Yeah. I just use an emulator. I mean,
what people do.
I'm a bad person.
No, you're a smart person.
No. You still show films. You're not a faker.
I wish I had I wish I knew more about emulators, because retro gaming, this is physical media. Is it part of physical media? Retro gaming and those old consoles and all that kind of stuff. There's a whole vast history behind all of that I know we kind of all lived through but weren't really aware of. Like I just kind of found out in my adult life, like there was a whole rivalry between Nintendo and Sega back in the 90s, and I'm like, I lived through that. I don't remember any of that. Granted, I was a little kid at the time and I had both systems.
You took it for granted.
You weren't supposed to know. You weren't supposed to know. I mean, there was no internet really then, so it was like
that's also true. There was no real information.
There's a good tie-in between video game. I mean, I see it as my film adjacent hobby in some ways, because I mean there are games that were like, I don't know, you guys probably know about Night Trap, but they filmed Night Trap on 35, and then so you're watching a 35 millimeter like print that was scanned and then made into a video. I don't know, it's crazy. I'm like, holy shit, like I didn't even know I could have this crossover. But the thing about digital, one funny thing is, I mean, I know there's a pro and con about digital, and there's always a debate, like you said earlier, Andrew, about digital or versus film. And I know everything has a pro and con, and it really is like up to the individual and like what they want. But man, there's so many times throughout my time, even at USC, where digital fails me every time. Like it just, for example, like last night I ran M on a 35, totally beat up print, looked like someone ran over it with a car and punched it a little bit. Just a lot of scratches, multiple cue marks, splices everywhere, part of frames missing. But it ran through fine. People loved the film. They had a great time. And then we were supposed to run the Testament of Dr. Mabuse digitally on a DCP, a Barco projector. Barco projector wouldn't power on. Wouldn't come on.
So
Had to cancel the screening.
Oh.
Like, I'm not a technician. I don't know. Like, if I went and opened up a digital projector, I would just be looking at a bunch of wires and a bunch of, I'm
You
like,
got to become an electrician then, like
Yeah.
it's a
or an
whole
engineer.
other,
yeah. I'm like, I'm not an engineer. I mean, that's the nice thing about film. If a splice broke, okay, take each reel, put it on the bench, splice it, okay, rethread it, okay.
It's
and
it's more
I
about
know
just having power. You just need power.
Yeah.
Well, not only that,
Yeah.
but it feels like when we're talking about analog technology, it's more hands-on. Like everything like is there in front of you to see. You know what I mean? You like you said, if a reel breaks and you have to reattach it, you see it, reattach it, or whatever. When it comes to digital stuff, you can't really see it. You kind of have to work with the technology, and sometimes the technology doesn't work with you. So
Yeah,
you're kind of stuck.
And it can be as simple as, I saw another projectionist on Twitter say this to me. They were just having this talk with their other coworker that with digital, it could be something as simple as, oh, this wasn't plugged in, to we have to go in the server and there's all these settings in the server, and then it gets to like very complex, like you said, engineering or like computer science, and I'm not that person that knows that stuff. And I know with film projectors, a part could break, and like we said earlier, there's not as many places where you can get a part for a projector, right? It could take a week, it could take longer than a week. And if you're a theater that relies on 35, that's like a whole week of loss of money. You're not going to make the money back, the box office back on that. You're not going to get your ticket sales. But I've had moments where with a sprocket, the clasp for the sprocket won't stay down to hold the film down.
Yeah.
And I've just grabbed a rubber band and I'm like, okay, gonna rubber band it together, and that's my fix for the show. But that's all like easy problem solving. I mean, it's not easy, but problem solving, it's easier to do and find solutions for. And so I think that's also comforting. Sometimes I feel with DCP, I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone because there is a limit to what I can do. And, then it's just me placing a bunch of calls to Christy or to the people who work for the other projectors. It's difficult.
It's a lot of when as technology even though it can be, like we've said, this whole thing more convenient and make things better, it can make things better, but it's also almost pushes some people that are used to old ways of doing things into this kind of weird corner where they're like, well, I mean, I'm so used to this other thing and it works great, but now you're telling me I have to learn this other thing that I feel like is backwards. Like you're like, this is not as good. It's easier, but it's not as good when it's not.
And I think it is important to talk about new technology and learn how to use it in a way that like can help the industry. But there's a lot of talks, academic talks about AI here, and I just like don't even want to listen to it. And I know I'm like 26 and I'm considered young, and like I feel like my grandpa doesn't even want to use a computer. He's like, I'm too old to learn this. I don't want to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
And I already feel like that at 26 because AI is so distressing to me and so intimidating. And just like the other day when I was here, there was a talk about it and they were saying, well, actually AI can, help creativity and not like squander it or hurt it. And I was like, all I see or hear is that AI is going to be used by people who are in power already, have money, and who want to remain in power. Like,
Yeah.
the end, that's my TED Talk, you know?
Honestly,
Well,
these people, I don't feel like they've seen any movies because they should know if they create AI, it's going to end the world and there ain't going to be anybody to watch anything anymore. So,
Ex
yeah,
Machina, hello,
true.
anybody? You
I know
know?
Ex
the
Machina,
Terminator, come on, guys.
Terminator.
I mean,
I
Jesus
mean,
Christ, how many times has this got to happen in movies and you're not going to take it
Battlestar
seriously?
Galactica. I
Yeah,
mean, it's interesting. I mean, I don't yeah, AI is a big talking point now with the strikes that are going on because, studios are finding their next thing that they can use to possibly cut some corners to make money faster, quicker, easier, where it's cost effective for
Convenient.
them,
yeah.
convenient. I mean, it screws over the writers and all this kind of stuff. It's kind of the same argument that we were having a couple of years ago, Stephen, when they were going to put not Steve McQueen, they were going to put um, James Dean in a movie, like a CGI version of James Dean in a movie. And
Yeah.
now we've reached a point where they're kind of doing that now with CGI characters with deep faking and all this kind of stuff. So I think that's also coming into play, when it comes to putting actors back into movies to play roles they played 50 years ago. I'm just thinking of Rogue One that I brought up earlier, where the Peter Cushing, they
Oh, yeah, that
CGI'd,
was frightening.
and young Carrie Fisher, they did that as well in the same movie. Luke Skywalker, they did it for the Mandalorian series, and for Boba Fett, and it's like,
God.
what line are we getting to where that's like, this is kind of
Well, I mean,
absurd,
they want more creativity, but they keep going back to the well for everything. It's
They
not,
do they really want more creativity, or do they just want more of the same
they're just
that sells?
yeah.
It's
I mean,
really tough,
the
and
whole
I'm
AI thing
thinking
is a way to eliminate writers, as
you
many writers
have to
as
pay them, and
yeah.
also algorithms will tap into, certain things like what does an audience want, what sells better, what doesn't sell better. They can probably manipulate that
Mhm.
algorithm within the AI to make the product that's more beneficial for the studio in terms of selling a product, not in terms of selling an artistic movie. And that's where I guess a lot of the jargon gets talked about and brought up, because now you're talking about, you're losing artistic intent, and now you're just going for a product. You know what I mean? Like you're selling soda versus selling a
It's
painting.
it
You
is a,
know,
it is a business, but it's still
the
it's
business
nice,
part of it gets dirty.
and it's nice to know that people are making decisions more
Yeah.
than you know.
And
But
I think that's why I like again, I keep going back to here's my TED Talk on why I love physical film, but, you know, when I'm inspecting a print and I get to see, like, each frame individually, it's just like I feel so much more connected to the film, and I just see so much intention behind everything, like, every person had a job and there was intention behind everything. You
it's
know,
a it's
maybe
it's a
sometimes not, but,
it's
you
a
know, it happens.
there's a
Yeah.
romantic feeling. It's a
I don't
Yeah.
romanticness,
I don't even mean to say this, but have you been seeing the AI pictures that have come up lately on Twitter and stuff, where they'll take a frame from a movie and then they'll be like, "Oh, they ran it through an AI so that they expand the frame to what's
Yeah.
around the frame." And I'm
Yes.
like, that's not the way this was made to be viewed. You know what I mean? And that takes
Yeah.
away the artistic intent. You're talking about the framing specifically. And it's like, yeah, this was supposed to be framed within this 35 millimeter square, 70 millimeter, 65, 16, whatever the case may be. And it's supposed to
Yeah.
look exactly like this. We're not supposed to know what's around the people in the frame. That's not important.
Yeah,
It's
it
what's in the
reminds me of,
frame.
this place came out with I don't know if it's probably a DVD, I'm assuming, or I think it was a DVD where they did the new Halloween, I guess, Halloween, Ends. Yeah, that one. Halloween Ends. I saw it in theaters and I, like, can't remember which one it is, but, they said, like, they, like, they recut the film so that it's, like, all the scenes, but without the new character, the man who's in it, I forgot
yeah.
his character name, and
Yeah.
they're like, "This is how it was meant to be seen," and I'm like, "This is how John Carpenter meant it to be seen." I'm like, "John Carpenter didn't even mean for you to see anything past Halloween 3, like,
Yeah.
straight up,
Yeah.
like, the man
Also,
was done."
Yeah, Carpenter didn't make the movie. So what would be
Yeah,
his intent?
I'm like, yeah. So, I mean, it's a different thing, but yeah, there's always people who are like, "This is, what they should be. This is how," and I'm like, Well, that's not what the director said. That's not what
No,
that's not what the people who made the film said. And I'm like, I know it's subjective, but like, come on, you
I
can't
know
be
it.
like, this is how it should be seen.
Right. And this does bring up another thing. I guess we could ask Amelia because we brought this up a few times, Stephen, director's intent. And a lot of directors have gone back to their old films and recut them, removed things, added things. And Stephen and I always brought up the debate like, you know, is it right? Is it wrong?
Well,
Is it their prerogative? Is it
well, ultimately, I think we've come to an
I
impasse
wanted to
of
ask
that.
him what Amelia thought,
Well,
but yeah.
of course, go ahead. Yeah, Amelia, please tell us your thoughts on it before I spat at the same thing I always say.
Yes.
So you're asking, repeat the question.
Well, certain directors go back and like to recut their movies.
Uh-huh.
Um, what is kind of your take on that idea? Like sometimes they'll do entire recuts, or sometimes they'll cut out certain scenes. I know the Coen brothers went back and what was the movie that they
Miller's
Miller's
Crossing.
Crossing? They
Yeah.
cut out like an edge of a
Like
scene.
just a line of dialogue they cut out.
Coppola keeps going back and recutting his movies.
Is it kind of like Blade Runner, where there's like all those
5
cuts and
cuts?
then
Multiple
yeah.
cuts. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, as someone who has to like discern like between the cuts when professors request like Blade Runner, and I'm like, okay, which version? When my eyes twitching when I have to ask,
Yeah.
because it's hard to keep track. I think it's like just let it go. That's my opinion. Where I'm just like, you had your moment, you didn't do it, it's over. Like,
Well, I mean, that's
maybe that's just because I have to deal with exhibitions, so to me
yeah.
it gets like confusing with all the cuts. Maybe from like if I was viewing it more in an artistic way, like, oh, I understand they have a passion and they have a project and they want to see it through and all, but yeah, I'm like, I'm sorry to all the people who are going to hear me say this, but I didn't even like Blade Runner. I don't care what cut it is. I
That
don't
hurt.
like it.
That
Doesn't
hurts so
matter.
much.
I know. I'm so sorry, but
it's gonna upset some people, but I don't care either. You should never care.
Oh, Steven, stop stabbing me in the back.
But essentially, I fall close to what you're saying. Like that. But my whole thing is that as you said, like you when you do the movie, when you did the movie back in the 70s and you did it with what you had and the budget you had, yeah, there was maybe things that you wish you could have done differently then. But to me, it's part of what makes it important that you just keep the thing it is. Like it's
Right.
it's become a time, it's a point in time. And if I'm somebody that's had this long career, if I'm going back and I'm looking at my old movies and changing things, you're changing history. You're going
yeah.
back and you're
Mm.
messing with history. And it's like the people already like that thing. Like, why would you go back to mess with that thing that people already like? Like,
And I
no.
think a lot of it kind of extends also to, I guess, another thing I want to transition to is something that you did bring up earlier, Amelia, the archiving, restoration, preservation, all that kind of stuff, where you kind of do have to go back and restore something.
Hmm.
And we see, we deal with the Blu-ray release that always say like remastered in 4K or remastered in 2K, new restoration, all that kind of stuff. And you do have to kind of maybe not have it in your mind, but you kind of understand that they have to maybe make the colors look brighter now, make the tone different or whatnot. Sometimes if the director's alive, they'll supervise it, or the
Yeah.
cinematographer will supervise it and stuff like that. I mean, all of that stuff I think is a little bit similar to what we're talking about in terms of the director's going back and cutting things, but sometimes things can drastically change depending on the way in which a film is restored, and we've seen that many
Yeah.
times where colors are completely changed.
Hmm.
I know Steven and I always bring up The Matrix. I know
Hmm.
Steven brings up the 4K being a lot different than the old Blu-ray looks, and then different than um, the way it looked in theaters. I mean, I didn't realize this until recently that The Lord of the Rings, which is my favorite movie of all time, has gone through so many different like color palette changes and like color tone changes, color
Hmm.
temperature changes
Grading.
over the
Yeah.
years depending on the format. Like they would put up comparison like DVD, Blu-ray, 4K, and it's all completely different. And I'm like, I never noticed that. I guess I was just too wrapped up in the movie, but that's another thing where it's like director's intent
Yeah.
versus the way in which it's always been. And then, you know, and also with film like you said, Amelia, film kind of fades over time, colors dwindle over time, and they have to kind of refresh it. But do you, is the question of them refreshing it back to the original, or make it even, or go even further? You know what I mean? I don't know where I'm going with all this. Kind of rambling, Steven. I really want you to
Well,
save me on this.
well, isn't there like God, what is that? There's a film called like I don't remember what the film is, but it's basically debating like what is a copy, what is the original.
Oh,
God, I can't.
F for fake.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a never-ending debate, I think, even throughout history with even different kinds of physical media, not even just film. What is the original? What is the intent? And that's, I think, an issue too of like when there's multiple people involved in a project, I bet it's so incredibly hard for there to be an original intent.
Yeah.
Unless the director is supervising literally or whoever the filmmaker is, or whoever's still alive, if it's an older film, you know, unless they're like breathing down the necks of everyone involved, how can it ever be the original? You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
don't
of
know.
course.
Maybe I'm just
I,
talking out my
honestly,
ass, but
no, you're not. Yeah, I think color, like the color stuff doesn't bother me nearly as much as just actually cutting the movie. Like I have my reservations about the Matrix, but it doesn't bother me enough to not watch that version of it. I can still watch the 4K of Matrix and I'll be fine. But it's when you actually either cut a scene or cut some dialogue that's where I have some issues, where I just wish sometimes that filmmakers, like you said earlier, would just let it go. Like, just
yeah.
don't so George Lucas, please stop adding CGI characters to your old Star Wars movies. Like we don't need that guy picking his nose in the corner. We don't need
Yeah.
that.
I mean, and I
it's
think the older a film gets, the more murkier it gets to trying to figure out original intent in terms of aesthetics. I mean, I've
Yeah.
talked about this numerous times. I think there have been lengthy arguments on the Blu-ray.com forums about the aesthetics of like the good, the bad, and the ugly, because there's been so many different DVDs and Blu-ray releases of it that some look more yellow, some don't look more yellow. What is the original tint by Sergio Leone, who we can't ask because he's been passed away for years? What did it look like back when it came out? In when it came out, and it's like, the further apart we get away from like original people who have seen these films, the more murkier it gets to like what should something actually really look like in the physical media realm,
Yeah.
or digital realm really now when it comes to streaming.
I
And
mean,
it's like,
I had
what are the answers? You
I guess I didn't really have like, this wasn't necessarily a critique or a negative moment I had. It was more of a positive moment. But I'm kind of obsessed. I wouldn't say obsessed, but it is like one of my favorite childhood movies, slash like I think it's cuckoo bonkers to the wall, which is anything Sid and Marty Krofft did is cuckoo bonkers to the wall. But I've only seen the movie Puff and Stuff, from 1970, on VHS my whole life. Only VHS, which isn't the highest resolution we have now, but it's what I had. That's what they released it on. It didn't get an upgrade for a long, long time. And I actually just watched on YouTube a clip from the movie in 1080p. And it was actually alarming to see it in 1080p. Like,
yeah,
I was like, oh my God, this is like hyper real. This is weird. But at the same time, I was like, there's all these things I will now be able to notice and see in the movie that was probably intentional, like even just set design, like little things that I never could see, in a 240 resolution, now in 1080p. So there are good things. Obviously, you guys know this. There are good things about restorations, and especially stuff that doesn't get restored often, that got lost when things went from VHS to DVD to Blu-ray. There's always a huge chunk of films that are going to get lost every time there's an upgrade to a better resolution.
yeah. And I mean, yeah, there's always stuff that takes years and years to get restored, or sometimes never does. I mean, um, I often reference the documentary "These Amazing Shadows," which talks about the National
Mhm.
Registry, and really talks about more about film preservation and archiving and restoration and stuff like that. Where there's a lot of film prints from a century ago, completely of movies completely gone, which is always bemoaning. I mean, there's always statistics about 70-80% of the silent era of films being completely gone because nobody saved any of them. Once they used them, they used them up. They were threw them away. They didn't need them. I mean, we oftentimes hear horror stories about that, and then we've often kind of see footage of these great archives with just like whole warehouses filled with canisters and all this kinds of stuff. I think that maybe the Film Academy has a lot of stuff, and then of course the National Registry has stuff, and then all kinds of archives all over the world. And we also do hear horror stories about a lot of the stuff in the boutique world, Stephen, where people are finding prints in barns,
Yeah, that happens too.
that are past like animal excrement and stuff like that, and leaky roofs. And I was just wondering, I guess, from just your perspective of dealing with having to get prints from certain areas, do you ever come across a print in such a condition where you're like, wow, I can't believe this is still able to work?
I'm so glad you asked. So I mean, this one didn't work, and I'm not going to say the distributor, although I didn't like how they handled the situation. I programmed Gigi, the musical from I think
Andrew, look
1959.
up which studio does that movie.
I can
No,
tell you
kidding.
I can tell you it's a Best Picture winner, which makes me surprised it wasn't in better condition.
So I think that was, I feel stupid saying I think, but MGM, and the distributor's not MGM because obviously
Okay, all
they
right, fine.
Because
don't
MGM's
exist.
library is everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's everywhere. But they sent us a print, and not only did it arrive the day of the screening, which we had to platter it still. At that point, we were still
Yeah.
plattering. The print was just smelled so strong of vinegar. And I like took tape off of the reel, and I remember taking the tape off, and the film just parted right down the middle as I took the tape off.
Oh.
And I because I didn't know what else to do, I was just gonna see how it could go on the platter, and it was just warped around the platter. I mean, it wasn't even like a flat. It was just like warped and like falling apart and smelled. And then, I told them, I said, "Hey, you have this print that you sent us and it's vinegar. We can't run it. We have to run a DVD." Uh, and then they're like, "Well, it's you should, that's why you should have rented." Their response was that we should have rented the Blu-ray and it's our fault. So that's why we're gonna have a subpar screening.
That's a hell of a response.
That's yeah. Oh, you should have just went with the because people just order film because whatever, like obviously you have that's your main thing. You want to show things on film. They should know that that's important. So yeah, of course you ordered the film and not the DVD or Blu-ray.
I think they still send prints out. I know because I see them all the time in various booths, but I think a lot of distributors don't care anymore. And there are distributors like Janus or other like Park Circus or, that are on kind of a pedestal in terms of good distributors who care and want to give people prints, who take care of the prints well. But there are a lot of, whether it be because cutting costs, they don't want to hire people to stay in the big shipping facility or where they keep all the prints, the warehouse or wherever. They don't like house the prints properly anymore. It's a print that's usually on its last leg. I had a lot of times where I would program stuff, like I programmed a Mannequin, and
wow.
they got back to us and they're like, we can't find the other 3 reels of the film. We only have the first 3. So, I mean, of course, it's our duty to take care of the prints, but it's also the distributor's duty to like, if you really don't want to rent out prints, just say so. Like, instead of just like renting out these vinegar prints or not taking care of the films, or like I had people put like electrical tape the films with electrical tape, or like some people I know have seen prints stapled together, or
Jesus.
Stuff
Damn.
like that, just like egregious stuff.
If that tears,
so
that's
yeah, it's bad.
It's sad really that those practices are still done in 2023 or the 21st century, because I thought we would have learned from mistakes like that over time.
That's
But I
that's
guess
normal.
I guess the industry really doesn't learn from their mistakes, which
That's
makes a lot of sense.
that's human behavior.
And
We don't learn from our past.
very true. And bringing up all this stuff that we talk about archiving and restoration stuff, Stephen, who did we talk to from American Zoetrope?
We talked to
Um,
James McCoskey.
Oh
yes,
yeah,
McCoskey. Yeah.
yes,
James.
we
Yeah.
had him on. Oh, gee, was it like a long time ago? But we
Yeah.
talked to him
American
about.
Zoetrope. We talked to him about at the time. We talked about his new Godfather restorations and things like that. And now I believe he's working on another one of Coppola's films.
Yeah, we
So
got to
yeah,
talk to him
so you
about
know
a lot of that.
James. You're aware of James.
I've seen because I'm part of like a forum that's about like distributors and exhibitors forums. So I see his name a lot, and I think that we've reached out to him for like distribution at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a super nice guy, and
Yeah, we
yeah,
had him on episode number 55.
yeah, it was a while back ago.
So like half the show ago.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
talked to him about a lot about that stuff because of, you know,
The archiving and all
the
that.
archiving and all that kind of, because I think he handles all that for Zoetrope, which has all of Coppola stuff. And kind of, as I just mentioned, connects back to earlier. They had to bring out all of that old stuff because Coppola's going back to recut a lot of
Yeah.
a lot of his films. I mean, he did it with Godfather Part 3. He did it with what's the vampire film that they just put out a new kind of Twixt, I think. Was
I
it
don't know.
Betwixt? I don't know. But anywho, but of course he went back and did The Outsiders was recut and things like that.
Yeah.
And then Rumblefish finally got a Blu-ray release many years ago. Great film.
Criterion. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
go on.
so wrapping up, we could talk. I feel like we could talk to you for an hour forever.
I do have a lot. Yeah,
we
I
have
could
a
go
lot
on
of things.
forever.
We just got to bring you back.
Are you saying I'll be back? Are you
I'm
saying that?
saying that we might reach out again. We might talk
Yeah.
about some other stuff. But before we go, I do
Mhm.
just simply we've kind of skirted. We've talked a little Dean Martin, that you love Dean Martin, but in general, what are just some of your favorite films?
Oh gosh. Okay, so I'm just gonna go off the top 4 on my letterbox because that's pretty easy for me to
All right.
remember. But Jean Renoir film called French Can. I love that film. I think it's an incredibly beautiful film. If you haven't seen it, I think it's
Okay.
one of his best films. Secretary, because
Nice.
I love James Spader. James Spader, if you ever
Yeah.
hear this, I love you. And Maggie Gyllenhaal is so amazing in that film. I love her character. I am too a very depressed woman, so I relate to that character. Sunrise, The Song of Two Humans. Of course, I love Murnau. And what else? I love a lot of musicals, Warner Brothers musicals, Gold Diggers of 1933, 42nd Street, even Gold Diggers of 1935, Footlight Parade.
Yeah.
Let's see. That's all I can really think of right now. My brain is going to get fried
lot
if
of
I start.
classic film.
good.
A lot of classic film.
You must
Yeah.
you must be loving Warner Archive lately because they've been putting out a lot of their musicals on Blu-ray.
Yeah, I love musicals. I mean, I had a huge musical phase in high school where that's all I really watched was MGM musicals. But I've tried to explore, more contemporary films, and by contemporary I mean from the 80s and
Of course.
90s. So I'm trying to branch out. I used to be very closed off of just liking films from like classic films, but there's beauty and artistry in any decade. You just have to
course.
find it.
That's good. That's good. Are you a fan of films about making movies? You love
Oh
stuff
yeah.
like yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's a genre I think especially a lot of film people get into. One I will suggest, and I always suggest to people, Living in Oblivion is a great. It's from the 90s. You said you're starting to get into the 90s stuff. Steve Buscemi plays this is during that indie. Yeah, this is that indie
I
phase.
love him.
Yeah. Where you were getting like your Kevin Smiths and stuff like that. So this movie is essentially about a film director making a little indie movie and the hardships of making a movie on such a small budget. It's a fantastic, cool movie.
My one movie about not necessarily making movies, but about running a theater There's a movie called The Smallest Show on Earth.
Mm.
It's a British, like, kind of dark comedy about this couple. It's from the 60s, about this couple who inherit this rundown theater, and it's like all of the staff are like old and decrepit, and the projectionist is a drunk, played by Peter Sellers. That is like my favorite movie about a movie theater. So
yeah,
Awesome.
I've
I
seen
would
it.
recommend it. Yeah.
It's very good.
Yeah.
It's
What's that?
directed by Basil Dearden.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What's that film that Severn put out recently with what's her name?
Oh my goodness, I have it. It's on
You know
my
what I'm
shelf
talking about,
actually.
right?
Yeah,
The one with the she goes crazy and starts killing people. I know that's really not a good description.
isn't it all
Every
about
Severn
evil?
film. No.
Yeah, like every Severn film, and throw some
Yeah,
sex in there, and then it's a Severn film.
it's all about evil.
All about evil. That's another one that would be a really good one. That's
Yeah.
about a girl that you've seen that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
love
so
that.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Natasha Lyonne.
Natasha Lyonne. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's so many references in that movie to like all like different genres and stuff, mostly horror stuff, but still,
Yeah.
it's fantastic. Yeah, Seven put
Yeah.
that out recently. Yeah, it was a movie I had never seen until they put it out. It was fantastic.
Yeah. But Amelia, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, and like I said, please come back. We also do another show called the Unwatched Pile, so maybe we could bring you over to there, and
Oh, I
you can
love that.
you could pull something out of that Warner Archive collection you have, and that you haven't seen, and watch it for the first time and talk about it, and then pair it with another movie that you've already seen in your collection. So maybe we'll do that at some point in the future.
Let's do that. I love that. Yes.
Awesome. Well, Amelia, if there's any place for anybody to find you online, where would that be?
I have very original usernames. They're all the same, because I can't keep them all straight. But if I change the names, but on Twitter, my username is Sleepy Serenade. You can also type in Mistress of the Real. Instagram also Sleepy Serenade, or maybe it's My Sleepy Serenade. I can't remember, but those are the two main platforms I'm on. And I'm also out and about at repertory screenings in LA. I'm at Secret Movie Club. So come on down and hang out with us and see some great films on 35 in the Arts District in downtown LA. And that's where you can find me for now.
All right. Well, fantastic. Thank you, Amelia. Thank you, aka Mistress of the Real. And we'll catch you around. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.